What is good? Welcome back to the channel. So, you saw my last video that now I'm considering shooting a little bit of digital as part of my general workflow. Not abandoning film by any means, but getting a bit of a digital itch just because I think there's a lot of cool stuff to play with out there that's not, analog. So this video is all about me trying to figure out what Leica I want to buy. And yes, I want to buy a Leica. We'll talk about that in just a second in terms of why, but I've been looking at a whole bunch of cameras and there's a lot of options when it comes to Leica, and now I'm kind of confused. I don't really know what I think might actually make me the happiest or give me the most satisfaction. But so as someone who's been doing photography for quite a long time, I'm almost at about 10 years now, both across digital and analog, I've never used a Leica camera, and that's kind of wild. So I'm just excited to jump into that, and I'm curious, what kind of satisfaction, what kind of experience I'm gonna get from shooting a Leica camera. Did you say Leica? What do you want this time? Man, I don't know if you should buy a Leica. That's a lot of money. Is it your money though? I'm the one that makes the money, not you. Okay, fine. But I still don't think it's worth it. You could buy like 5 cameras with that Leica money. Listen, it's not always about the money, but I'm not gonna explain this to you right now. Actually, do you know how many rolls of film you could buy with that Leica money? That's a lot of film. Get out. Carry the 1, add the 3, move over the 5. Yo, get out! Fine. You don't have to get so angry. Film is life. All right, so let's talk about the different cameras that I've actually been looking at recently. So first off, I want to go with the M9. And I mentioned the M9 specifically because of the CCD sensor that it has. I'm no expert about sensors, but all I know from what I keep reading and what is kind of interesting me is that the CCD sensor was developed by Kodak first and foremost. And secondly, people say that that style of sensor is a bit closer to kind of the look that you get from film, specifically film colors, as compared to the more traditional sensor, the CMOS sensor, CMOS sensor that you see in basically every single kind of typical digital camera nowadays, including Leica cameras as well. But the M8 and the M9 are older digital Leica cameras, and those use the CCD sensor that everybody kept talking about. And if you look this up on different blogs and things like that, people are raving about it. And I want to see it for myself. I'm curious if that's actually going to give me, some sort of a satisfaction optically and visually the way that film does, for example. And I don't only shoot film because of the look per se. Obviously film has a look and I really appreciate that about film, but for me it's all about the process. So despite those cameras having that CCD sensor, they also are very similar to the way that Leica film cameras were designed. So I'm really curious to kind of experience that. So that's kind of the first category of Leica camera that I'm really into. The second category of Leica camera that I'm into is actually the Leica M240 type. And that camera is kind of a random one, at least random to me in terms of the Leica lineup. It's a digital camera, of course, but it actually is one of the initial transitions into the CMOS style sensor. And I think the reason why that camera is intriguing is because it's a lot cheaper than an M10, for example, which we'll get to in a second. This Leica M, as they call it for shorthand, sits kind of right in between the 8 and the 9 and then the future 10 cameras. So you got technology that's somewhere in the middle. It's not super modern, but it's also not the oldest Leica technology for digital cameras. And like I mentioned, the price is somewhere in the middle as well. So you can probably get a pretty decent deal and get your entry into the Leica M lineup. And those cameras look nice. They look kind of very similar to all the other M cameras, but they're kind of their own little special niche there. And to be honest with you, I don't really get why those cameras exist. Again, I'm not some Leica kind of historian, fanboy, whatever you want to call it. So I don't know all the ins and outs, but I'm really curious, why that exists. So it's intriguing, and the price appears to be kind of right on that. Caveat, with all these cameras, the price is just for the body. I then still have to figure out the lens, and perhaps that's a whole different video, but there's Voigtlander lenses, there's TT Artisan lenses, and of course, there's Leica lenses. And I then have to figure out which one of those actually applies for what I'm trying to do and my budget. So we've talked about the 8 and the 9, we've talked about the M, parentheses 240, and now is the M10. And the M10 is, I guess, the most recent line of M cameras. The M10 itself is from 2017, I believe. So by today's standards, it's actually pretty antiquated. And if you look at kind of the specs, I think it's a 24 megapixel sensor. There's no video capabilities with the camera, even though there is a live view, I think. And the camera very much feels like it's an old product from back in the day. However, if in my head right now, it kind of feels more like antiquated modern cameras as opposed to antiquated, like original digital older cameras. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like the Leica M8 and 9 feel like old school digital cameras that have their own kind of flavor, whereas the M10 Just feels like an old modern camera of, you know, the latest generation. And that's interesting to think about because then you're kind of buying a camera that might feel handicapped in a way. Obviously, you've got the Leica body, the mechanics, the design, all of that is there, not debating that at all. But from a technical perspective, if you're gonna go into kind of the modern age of digital cameras, is this one gonna feel like it's missing some things that, you know, it should have? And I think that's why they came out with the M10R, because that was a much more recent update on the original M10. You've got a way more powerful sensor from a megapixels perspective, and I guess theoretically dynamic range and all of that. But you still have the classic design, and I think you've got some video capability potentially, although I'm not sure, don't quote me on that. But of course, you got a higher price tag. The M10, because it's older, you can get for definitely cheaper than the M10R. But the M10 is not cheap. We're talking here, I don't know, 5,000 US dollars at least. Without a lens. M10R is basically brand new. I don't know, you can probably buy used somewhere, but I feel like you won't really get that big a discount given that it's all new. So, you know, that's the other option. I'm not looking at the M10R. I don't need the megapixels. I don't need any of that. But I guess for me right now, I'm trying to understand if I'd rather have a more modern style camera versus a much older camera with older technology, perhaps more antiquated technology. And I'm curious if visually that'll give me, you know, some sort of satisfaction. Does the CCD sensor actually, you know, get images that look more like film, whatever that means? The M10 definitely does not. That's not really a question for that. But the older M9 M8, perhaps. So I guess what I'm looking for is some help. I've got money to spend, and I'm curious if you can help me figure out what Leica to get. I'm also trying to get some cameras currently to borrow, just so I can kind of get a feel, because I feel like it's smarter to do that. Borrow a camera, touch it, play with it, figure it out before actually spending money on it. So I'm trying to figure that out, and if I can, of course, we're going to make some content here. But in the meantime, doing lots of research, looking at some prices, trying to familiarize myself with what's out there, just so I can kind of make what I think would be an informed decision. But anybody out there having M8 or M9, I'm really curious about those cameras. There's not tons of stuff on YouTube about it, although there is some stuff, but I don't have a lot of, you know, there's no opinions at scale here. So I'm really trying to figure out what the deal is. All right, y'all. I hope you're excited about me buying a Leica. I feel like this is kind of what's going to happen eventually, but really interesting now that it's not even going to be a film Leica, let alone potentially a modern Leica. It might be an old digital Leica. Let's figure it out. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening, and definitely comment down below what your thoughts are, because, you know, man's got to buy a camera. All right, y'all. Till the next video. I'm out.